Good morning. It's Wednesday. I have a little mason jar I'm going to do today. But if you are joining for the first time, I'm Shelley. I'm from Burlington and Ontario, and we've got gorgeous sunshine today. And every Wednesday morning, I um, sorry, I just got a pop up here on my screen. Every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, I do a Facebook Live. So I can't get rid of it now. There we go. Okay. So I do Facebook Live every Wednesday morning. It's usually a watercolor, and I choose all kinds of different subjects. I do keep them in my Facebook page, so if you don't want to miss one, or if you want to catch up on some that you might have missed, you can go to Shelley Pryor Fine Art, and that is my page, and then you can uh, follow me, and then you'll get you'll get a notification. That is when I'm going live. So let me just switch over here now, and we'll talk about what I'm going to work on today. Okay, and so I have this just a very simple little mason jar, but it has some writing on it and everything else. And glass can be intimidating enough without having lettering and things like that that can make things a little bit more confusing. So um, let's, there we go. All right, so I can see everything here. Just trying to shift a few things around here on my screen so that I can see what you are typing, because then I can answer your questions as we go along. There we go. Good morning. Hi, Evelyn. Hi, Marlene. Okay, so there we go. And so I have this little mason jar. Sorry, I'm a little bit tongue-tied this morning, it seems. But I have this little mason jar, and there's writing on it, and there's kind of a design on it and everything else. Now, I could have also, I've got subtitles right in the middle of my picture here. I guess you can turn those off in settings. I think you can. I hope you can. Anyways, if they're bothersome, you can turn them off. And so anyway, my little mason jar here, it doesn't have a lot of color or anything. I think I'm going to put some color into it though, because that will make things a lot more inviting as a painting. If I did it all in grays, it would be okay, but it would look more like a study and not so much like a painting. But there's all this writing, and you know, there's all these sort of funny shapes and things in here. So what I've done, in order to speed things up, is I have transferred from the photo directly. So I printed it out in the actual size that I'm going to paint, and I put some graphite paper but today I was just using the commercial type, and this one's a gray. It's a wax free. It's very important to get wax free transfer paper when you're doing watercolor, because the wax in other brands that aren't wax free will repel the watercolor. So when you're painting on, it just sort of beads up on the little all the little lines and doesn't paint in them. So you want to make sure you're using a wax free, or better yet, use a homemade graphite paper, which is easy to do with a piece of tracing paper. You pencil the entire back or and the entire side. Smudge it around with a paper towel. Don't miss any spots. Just cover the whole thing. Wipe it all off. Wipe off all the excess. And then you can go from there. So let's talk about what it is that I transferred. Okay, so what I transferred is basically wherever I see all the lines. Now I transferred with very, very light pressure for most of this. Where there's really dark areas, I used heavier pressure so that I could identify which areas are light and which areas are dark. So basically, I transfer with a stylus tool. Okay, so this is a stylus tool right here. It's got a little bit of a ball on one end and a tinier one at the other end. And so basically what I'll do for some of the dark areas, I'll just sort of color them in basically with this tool so that I can identify them easily when I take the line drawing off or when I take the photo off. Because if I see a whole lot of lines and I don't know which ones are light and which ones are dark, it can get very confusing. And I especially use this technique when I'm doing something like cut crystal that can be very complicated in terms of what is highlight and what is shadow. So now that I have it transferred, what I have done here is I have used masking fluid to mask off only the highlight areas. Okay, so if I mask the entire lettering, for example, so let's take this little example here. Okay, so I've done some words, and this is the temptation a lot of people have when they're doing mason jars and things with writing on them that might be raised or three-dimensional or glossy. So if I had this type of thing and all I did was mask off the entire letter, and then I did a wash for my jar and everything else, think of what I have to do now once that masking fluid comes off. So let me zoom in on this. I would have to now come in, not only paint in the letters, but I have to kind of match the shading that's around everything because it's glass, right? So whatever is behind the glass or showing through the glass is going to show through the letters too. So I would have to go in and now carefully paint in everything except for the highlights, but I would also have to start mixing in, you know, the changes of color and all of that kind of thing. And that is an acceptable way to do it. But I just find it a little bit tedious to do it that way. So I just start off by masking only the highlights. I have already marked where the dark areas are by using a heavier pencil or using a little bit more pressure, or taking a pencil and penciling it in darker after you've taken off your drawing and, you know, just figure out where those are. So if I zoom in on this, you can see that what I've done, wrong way, sorry, okay, is I have masked only the highlights. So that's what I've done, and I'm just going to start painting in my entire jar like the letters aren't even there. That's going to make it a whole lot easier. It will also avoid the problem of getting what I call a double line. So you double up your line. So if I go over, if I don't stay within my shape very well, it gets a dark outline because I've got twice as much paint there. I've got twice as much color. So by doing it the way that I'm going to be showing you, it will make things a lot easier. Right, so if I miss going over the line, you can see that that gets a little bit extra dark. I don't want that. So let me just see here. Yes, I actually have a YouTube video on how to make your own graphite paper. So my YouTube channel is the same as my Facebook page. It's Shelley Pryor Fine Art. So if you go to YouTube and you go to Shelley Pryor Fine Art, you'll find me. And I have a homemade graphite paper, I think it's called, video on how to make that. So I'm going to use a big brush now, and I'm just going to start painting this in. Now, as I said, this is actually a color picture that you're looking at, but it's basically the jar with a white background. So the background you put in, I kept it simple because I thought that would make things a lot less confusing here, and the letters just show up a little better. So I kept the background very simple. I just took a piece of paper, and a long piece of paper, and I folded it up. I held it up and took the picture with my phone. So that's how I did the picture, and that's why there's no tabletop or anything in the background. It's, just that sort of thing. So you can see the reference image on the screen here. So I'm just going to dive right in, and I'm going to start incorporating some colors. Now, before I actually start painting, I should tell you I'm working on Arches 140-pound cold press paper, which I have stretched in advance. So what I did was I soaked my paper in room temperature water for about 2-3 minutes, just long enough for it to get sort of al dente. If you think of it in terms of pasta, it would be like al dente, so it would be just be loose enough to bend, but not soggy, not so saturated that the coating, the sizing that's on the paper is removed. So I just want to soak it long enough for the paper to absorb the moisture. Then being 100% cotton, it's going to shrink. So what I have to do is I have to staple it down very quickly after I take it out of the water. Staple it down really quickly and allow it to dry. So overnight I usually leave it, and it's totally dry, totally flat in the morning, and then I tape off my edges for clean edges, and to help hold the edges of the paper down a little bit better too. I don't want to catch it with a ring or something, and I don't want paint going underneath, so keep the back kind of clean. Then I can just do my transfer as I already talked about, and into the painting we go. So I'm going to be using a lot of Payne's gray for this because it is predominantly gray, but I'm going to be injecting a little bit of color into it as well. So I'm going to start with the lid, which is pretty gray, and I'm just going to come in here and paint a light wash. Now let's put a little blue in this. Just a little bit of cobalt blue I'm sticking in here. My paints, by the way, I'm using mainly Da Vinci paint, Da Vinci artist quality paint, and I have a few Winsor Newton, Core, I own some Daniel Smith too. I like a lot of different brands of paints, and I've used I usually use Da Vinci because our local art store carried Da Vinci, and it was a nice moderately priced artist quality paint, which was readily available to my classes. I'm going to put a little bit of pink in here too, just to make it a little bit more lively. Here's Permanent Rose, and just letting that settle in there. So the Da Vinci was a moderately priced, but then our local art store stopped carrying it, so now I have to get it online. But that's why I was using mainly Da Vinci. It's because it was moderately priced for my classes that I teach locally. All right, so now I'm going to come down into the body of the glass. Here I can basically paint as if there's nothing masked off. Because what I did is I masked all that, all the highlights, not only in the lettering but in the glass as well. This is going to be a fairly light wash. I'm going to water some of it down. Some areas are going to get a little lighter than others, in which case I will just be painting with clean water. Let's get some more color in here. Let's get some blues and things going on in here. Can you imagine how tedious this would be if I had to paint around all of this stuff? Pinks. So I'm working my way down. I don't want to attempt to paint an outline around my jar just to get my edges out of the way kind of thing. I'm working my way down because I don't want brush marks in here. Okay, painting with water here just to keep the lines all soft. It's very light on this side. I didn't really rinse my brush. I just picked up some water, and what little bit of paint was in my brush made the water a little bit dirty, but not much. And then I'm going to come back to more color here. Keep those edges wet. Let's get some blues in here. Just going careful along my edges here. I want to get a clean edge. Maybe I can do something other than pink and blue. Maybe I'll put a little queen gold in here. Ooh, that's pretty. Come in and add a little of that. You know, if there were a lot of things in the room that were reflecting onto my glass, it would pick up these colors. Well, maybe not these colors in particular, but it would pick up color from around the room. Just, I think it makes a more interesting painting too. The one thing I'm just not going to do though is I'm not going to put red, blue, and green, or sorry, red, blue, and yellow on top of each other, because that's just going to make an ugly color. So you know, I can put a little bit of the yellow can go on the blue, a little of the yellow can go on the red can go on the blue, and so on, but not all three. So I am making a conscious effort not to contaminate my color. It's a little darker along this lower edge, so I'm just putting a little bit of blue in there. This is so much nicer than gray. I am using gray, but I don't have to use a lot of it. Okay, so basically I have my jar covered at this point. So I'm going to turn down my sound here, and I'm going to dry this really quickly using a cool setting on my blow dryer so that I don't overheat my masking fluid. Okay, so I have dried it. It's not 100% dry. I can still feel a little coolness. Um, Coolness with the back of your hand will indicate that the paper is still a little bit wet, but the paint on the first layer, your paint is quite diluted. I've been working with pretty diluted color, so it soaks right into the paper, so it tends to dry pretty quickly. And now I'm going to move on, and I'm going to start putting in some of the darker values that I see in the jar here. Then I'll move on to a little bit more detail. So I'm going to come in again with that Payne's Gray, and I'm going to be working on dry for this. So I'm picking up, this is a number 12 round, but I could be working quite easily with an 8 here. My paper size is 8 by 10, so of course the brush size that you use will be relative to the size in which you're working. So I can see my lines through this first wash, so I might as well just jump right in. Now, I did that a little bit on the light side, so I'm going to put a little bit more color in here. I'm using Payne's Gray for this. All right, that's the inside. And I'm going to come along and get the side. Now every time there's a change of plane, so you have the top and the light source is coming from above, so you've got the lightest area on top, then you've got the side, and then sometimes you have indents or underside that you can see, and then you'll have it even darker still. So there's a couple of little light areas along here, and I did mark them off when I was transferring my design, so I'm going to paint around them. Except I missed there. Okay, I'll just go over that, lift a little out there if I need to. Ooh. Big icicles are falling off my roof. Made me jump. We're having a bit of a thaw here. And so I'm looking carefully here at these shapes. I have been buying mine at Bijan's, Shar. You actually put me on to Bijan's. Bijan's is an art store in London, Ontario, where you can get Da Vinci paint. I believe Studio 6 in Markham also sells it. I'm deliberately leaving some light areas here. I could have masked them off, but I really didn't want them stark white. So I wanted some of that radiating color to come through, not just the highlight areas, but through what I'm putting on now as well. Okay, so I'm putting a little bit of an edge on that lid. A little bit messy at this stage, but that's okay. Coming in and adding a little bit of that ribbing just to hint at it. You can see the lid has a bit of that rib thing going on. I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see a little closer what I'm working on. That's a little better. And all right, so there's a little bit of a grip, I guess, on the top of that lid where it's crimped a bit to fit. And now I'm just going to come down into the body here and start incorporating a little bit more shadows, shadow suggestions in here too. So I'm looking and I'm, just trying to sort where I've got some darkers, not the darks. I'm not on the darks yet. I'm just doing this is more like think of this as a mid value. I did a mid light value. I did a light value, and now I'm doing a mid value. And I'm going to maybe soften an edge. So when I'm softening an edge, what I do is I blot my paper towel, blot my clean brush on a paper towel, and I quickly come in and just tickle the edges of this. I lay my brush down, not just the tip toe of the brush, but I lay the brush down in the area that I want to get things to soften. Not all the lines I want soft in this stage, so I'm not going to wet the paper first, or I'm not going to wet the whole jar, but I will occasionally stop to soften edges. So that's what I'm doing. And there's a kind of a dark, I guess this is maybe a reflection of the lid. I don't know what that is. I'm not going to try and figure it out. I just see a shape there. I'm going to paint it. Let's put a little blue in it. I like blue. So I don't need to make it precise to my reference anyway. You know what glass is like. You turn your head an inch and it all changes. So let's get some of that pink, because I'm coming into the area where I had some pink. So let's get some pink in here. Soften some edges. Let's come into, I want to keep this area pretty light in here. This area here is not going to get much value change, so I'm just going to use clean water there. I think in this area up here could probably be a little bit darker than it is. make that highlight that I masked out really show up. Now I'll zoom out a little bit because I'm working on the lower part. I don't want you to see all of it, what I'm working on. There we go. Hi Diana. Hi Mary. How did I decide on the colors? I just like them. Honestly, it doesn't matter the colors that you're using. You think colors are the most important thing, but actually it's the value that's more important. So really, I could do this Technicolor if I want to. I don't mean Technicolor in the sense that it's highly saturated and that the colors are like neon or anything like that. But what I mean is that the value is going to tell the story more so than the color will. So the bottom of this is pretty light, so I don't think I'll do any more right there. Yeah, but there's no specific reason that I'm using those yellows or the yellow or the pink or where I'm putting them or anything like that. So you can take notes, Joan, but this will be on my page, my Facebook page. So if you want, you can watch it again. You can watch the replay. All right, so I think I'm just going to take my dryer and quickly dry this, and then I can move on to the next layer. All right, getting dry. I'm going to move to a smaller brush now because I'm going to need to start getting in some of the darker colors that are going to be on this lettering. So I'm going to move in closer so that you can see as I do these words. I always go the wrong way because everything's backwards on this. Can I go closer? Let's try. Nope, that's as close as it goes. All right, so I'm going to come in now with my Payne's Gray, and it's going to be a little bit heavier now. And I'm going to do just the shadow areas of my letters. So I see a little bit here and there, but they aren't all the same. Sometimes I put it on too dark, I just blot that off. They're not all the same, and it's important to note that they're not all the same because they the way the light hits them, the letters are angled, the light is hitting it, you can see the background color through and so on. Sometimes you have a lot of missing information when you're painting glass. And what I mean by that is that you don't have to have an outline around every letter. You don't need to have every letter completely readable. It's amazing. You've all seen those things on on Facebook and stuff where, you know, somebody says, if you can read this, and it's all done with letters and numbers and things like that, and it's just because it's close enough and people can read it. And it's the same concept here. You don't have to have every single bit of information. So I'm blotting as I go along so that these won't be too dark. Because these ones on the first 4 letters are pretty subtle. Don't fall into the trap of trying to make them dark so that they're easier to read. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Truly. I think I'm going to do should be doing this a little bit pinker here. A little bit into some of the gold stuff even. For some reason they made the middle 3 letters larger than the other ones. I don't know why they did that on the jar. I guess they did that so that people would pronounce it Bernardin. I don't know. That's my guess. All right, so I'm going to let that dry, or maybe I'll dry it. I'll dry it quick. Actually, what I might do is I might move on down and continue adding a little bit of shading onto some of the other bits and pieces a little lower down on the pattern. Oh, wrong button. There we go. Right, takes a second to focus, but usually comes in quick. So underneath all of these is a little bit of a shadow. So I've got masking fluid on here. This was tedious masking, to be honest, but the smaller you work, the more challenging it's going to be. So my advice, don't work too tiny when you're doing this kind of thing. Look carefully at your reference. There's a shadow side and there's a light side, and it's not always where you think, because you always think that the shadow's going to be on the left side, but that's not always the case when it comes to glass. So you just have to look carefully. Okay, I see a little squiggle here, and the dark part is on the top. So I'm going on top of my masking for there and creating that little bit of a shadow. And here it's kind of below and on the left. So, you know, it just keeps changing as I go around here. But that's what's going to give the three-dimensional aspect to this. All right. And if you get one or two wrong, big deal. It won't matter. It really won't. I wouldn't go so far as to try to start fixing stuff. There's all kinds of little lines and things, and I'm just doing my best to guess at what's what, but I'm sure I'm getting some of it wrong. A little bit challenging to see the masking fluid even. Yeah, I've used blue, and now I've put this sort of blue and gray on top, so I probably should have chosen a different color to mix into my masking fluid so that I could see it better, but no matter. I can see it well enough. I just know that it's probably a little challenging to see on the camera, and sorry about that. So fortunately, I did do some dark lines where some of the shadows are going. So, and I didn't mask on top of those dark lines, I masked beside them. So that is helping me to figure things out. For every single one of these highlights, I'm checking which side or where does that shadow go, just to make sure I don't mess it up. Sometimes it goes on all sides. Weird. But that's the way glass goes. This one's darker, so I'll put in a little extra color there. They don't all have a shadow either. Some of them are so subtle, just that little bit of highlight that comes from when taking off the masking fluid is going to be enough. Okay, so there's a couple of extra darks along here, and they're fun to put in. And I'm going to come in along the bottom here. And get this shape along the side put in. Let's put a little blue in that just for fun. All right. And then I'll touch a little bit of extra dark just along that one side. Make that interesting. I'm going to come along the bottom. I better zoom out a little bit. So I have some shapes that are along the bottom here. One little trick I'll just share with you is, if you have a little bit of a shaky hand and so on, I find it easy to sort of rest your hand. Sometimes I use my baby finger for support, and I pull my arm instead of just my wrist or my fingers. And I find that I can get a little more control and a little smoother line by doing that. I teach a lot of seniors, so uh, they find that that's very helpful if they just basically lock their hand in a position and pull their arm instead. Because if you sort of support your hand and lock your brush, you can just pull it along and get a smoother line. So you can see my whole arm is moving. I'm going to come in from the other side as well. And this time I'm not using my whole arm, I'm just painting it in. Alright, so there's some little shapes in here that I will get in. I will approximate what they are. I don't have to make them exact. But one thing's for sure is they don't have to be really steady. The only ones that really need to be steady is basically the outside. Because when you get glass, there's always a distortion factor that happens as well. Brights Grove, I don't even know where that is. Welcome. All right. Yeah, I actually have, do I have any glass workshops coming up? I have a number of workshops coming up. I listed 3 months worth in my website just recently. And my website, if you want to check that out, is shelleypryor.com. And that's Shelley spelled with an E-Y, not L-L-Y, it's E-Y. And yeah, so I have a lot of Zoom workshops coming up. I spent quite a bit of time last weekend updating my website, so there's a lot of choice there. Different subjects every week. And there's some more lettering here in this Mason aspect, Mason wording. And so very, very pale. This one's a little bit yellow, so I'm just going to get this sort of blended in here. This is not very much. I've got a tiny bit of masking on here, but not much. Most of this is just sort of very difficult to read. This is that sort of missing letter business that I was talking about earlier. And so I can just sort of dance around these letters a little bit and make them almost not readable. When that masking comes off, it'll be easier to figure out. And it's amazing, the human brain works that way. I think one of the downfalls that I've been guilty of in the past as well, is that I tend to go a little too crazy with details, and it's really not necessary. And to take that one step further, people really like not knowing what things are. It adds that little bit of mystery in your painting and gives them something to do. They got something to figure out, so it makes your painting a little more interactive. So people actually like that sort of unfinished. And I think that's probably what my attraction to, I absolutely love people's watercolor sketchbooks. I don't know what it is. It's just that looseness and way that they, put stuff together. I just think that they're so much fun. Some of that's bleeding, doesn't matter. I don't care. Now I have some darks to put in here on the last three letters. So I have that marked with some darker transfer lines. So I'm going to put those in. On some of these, there's just, all there is just a little, like on the M, there's like one little spot. You might think, the whole lettering would have shadow and stuff, but no, it doesn't. This is glass. All those rules go out the window with glass. So and you can see that N really well. Everything else is kind of obliterated. Now I'm going to come up here to my lettering, a little further up. It's dry now. I dried it a little bit, but now I'm going to come in, I'm going to add the extra darks. And I can hardly wait to take off that masking fluid. All right. It's getting there. Got a couple of these I'm going to darken up a little bit more down here in the design of the jar. Let's zoom out a little bit there. There goes more ice. It's all melting. It's funny, we have a lot of cardinals in our yard. And we're all Twitter-pated this morning, so spring must be on the way. You have to be a certain vintage to know what Twitter-pated is. All right, so I'm going to come in and add in some of the markings on the left side of the jar. These are fairly dark, not crazy dark, but fairly. If I want to transition it to a lighter value, I just add water to continue this down. That's the edge of the jar, so I need to make sure I'm not getting too wobbly there. And usually when there's markings on glass, they're not just, it's not like you took a magic marker and you made a perfect line. They're usually a little bit jiggly, but they're also thick and then thin. So they vary in width as you go down. So that'll make your painting more interesting too. All right, so I'm going to get some more darks in my top of my jar. I'm going to get some more Payne's Gray going here. Still using a pretty small brush here, but I'm working fast, and so I'm getting things to blend together. But if you're not the kind of person who can work fast, I would suggest using a larger brush that holds more paint to keep the flow going. All right, so and then I just start softening up the color, so diluting it a little bit, coming over to this side. So this right hand side, it's a little bit darker. Oops, I just realized you're not seeing that very well, are you? There, I just darkened right here, and now I will come down and darken below that. This is a 4 round that I'm using right now. This is just a very inexpensive synthetic bristle travel brush that I got from Amazon. You can just put in watercolor travel brush in Amazon, and you will see these come up, and the handle comes off, and you can cap it and toss it into your paint bag for when you're painting, traveling, doing plein air, that sort of thing. So I'm darkening the threads on this, and I'm going to darken the rim, things like that. I used a big brush to start with, but I need to fine tune this. It's a little bit looking pretty rough at the moment. So I'm trying to use a smaller brush here to get a little bit more refined. And I can add some more darks into some of the glass below as well. That one kind of faded right out, so I'm going to put that one back in and soften the edges. Rinse and blot my brush, and then tickle those edges, and that softens that. Now, I'm not going to take off any masking yet, because I see that I really need to come in and darken this little section in the middle here. But I'm just going to put a few more accents up here before I do that. Going to soften this a little bit. That highlight seemed a little bit bright to me, and actually these ones do too, so I'm just going to soften them a little bit. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my bigger brush here, and I'm just going to get a little bit more shading in this segment here, which comes down into the writing. So down in the writing I'll go pinks. Keep that paint fluid so that it doesn't get brush marks and patchiness and whatnot. Why am I darkening this up so much? It's mainly because if I don't darken this, the glass won't have its sparkle. You cannot have light without dark. Or you won't perceive light without dark, I should say. So I'm putting a little bit more Payne's gray a little further down. Let me move down to where I'm working. Get the whole thing on there. All right, so I'm coming down here and adding a little bit more in this section. And I'm going to soften this. So I take my wet brush and soften that. Getting there. I think I'm just about getting pretty close to taking off this masking, but I have to dry things before I can do that. Little bit of something down here, so I'm just going to put a little bit of that in there. What I'm looking for at this stage is value changes. I'm squinting my eyes and I'm looking at my reference, and I may have made that a little bit too dark there, but I'll blot a bit of it off in that section there. All right. So okay, Sally, you may have arrived a little late. So the colors I'm using are Payne's Gray, Cobalt, Permanent Rose, and just a little bit of Quinacridone Gold. So I need to take my pickup tool. This is a rubber cement eraser that you can get at any art store. But if you don't have this tool and you have masking fluid, you can just take masking tape, wrap it around your finger with the sticky side out, and it takes this masking fluid off beautiful. So now I'm just going to pull off the highlights. And I'll probably need to, touch up bits here and there. Some things will probably be a little too stark. But that's the sparkle on the glass. You know, you see the white come back, and voila, you've got your lettering. The masking fluid, I always run my hand over the paper to see, because you can always feel that rubberiness to the masking fluid if you've missed any spots, because sometimes it's hard to see whether or not it's all off or not. So now I just, you know, any little final touches that I need to do, I can just come in and do. This little section up here, for example, is a little bit too stark. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to tone this down, soften it a little bit. So just with some dirty water, basically, with Payne's Gray. But I could use any of the colors. Doesn't matter as long as I get a little bit of softness going on in there. Some of these letters still seem a little bit bright to me, so I'll tone them down just slightly. Don't cover up all those whites, though. That's important. Oh, there goes more snow falling down. Okay, and if by chance you've missed masking anything, you've got white to the rescue. You know, I see a little spot on my A that I probably forgot to mask. I am using this, and I can't show you the label because it's so old, it's all worn off. It's called Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. That's what I'm using here. And it is basically like a white gouache. And yes, you can use a white gouache, that would work fine. Chinese white, you know, any of those things, it's all fair. So I missed a little spot on my A, but there it is, right there. I think I'm good everywhere else. So that was a little tiny speck, just one little thing I forgot, and we're good to go. So my mason jar is done. I just haven't done a background. So when I do my background, though, I have to keep in mind that I've used colors in my jar. I'm going to incorporate color in my background as well. So I might as well do that. I'm going to use clean water. I'm going to use a really big brush here. This is a big brush. Any big wash brush that holds a lot of water will do. And I'm going to come close to my edges, all the way to the bottom. Clean water. I'm wetting the paper. This is so I can do a nice transition. When you wet your paper, you buy yourself time too for a wash. So there's a surprising amount of water on this. This is cotton paper. It holds a surprising amount of water. It's like paper towel. Holds a lot more than your printer paper, for example. So all right, so I'm coming with a flat brush here so that I can come up to my edges a little bit better with the water. It's hard to see water right up against an edge, so I usually just try and come close. I don't try to, I don't come right up to it because there's a pretty good chance I'll go over it. All right, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to start putting in some gray, Payne's Gray. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see everything. There. And I'm putting Payne's Gray in here. But I'm going to incorporate some of my color too. So little bits, just little bits, okay? I'm not adding too much. but I want to get a little bit incorporated in here. Keeping that shine on the back of the jar. All right, so I'm coming down around the lid here. This is where I can take this color here and come right up to my edges now, because I was a little nervous about doing it with the water, but now I can do it with the paint. So I'm coming down. I'm going to come to about where the lid is here. And I'll do the same on the other side. Maybe I'll do blues over here. Okay, I'm going to come in a little more blue maybe. Okay, now I'm going to rinse my brush. Oh, just before I do that, I'm going to make sure this is all really nice and wet up here and well blended. And then I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to start walking this down with clean water. Clean water here. I have to do both sides at the same time because it's all connected, right? So rinse again, more clean water. More clean water. So eventually that just fades to nothing. Now the problem is here is that your paper may wrinkle, right? So if your paper starts wrinkling, or if you're, maybe forming a line or something unpleasant. Ooh, I got myself into some white here. So I'm wiping off the excess from my edges. And I had this stuck to the paper table. Okay, so I can manipulate the paint if it's still wet. It's getting to the point where it's a little bit dry. But if you have any valleys where paint is collecting, so maybe I don't really have that, but if I re-wet this a little bit, add a little bit more color and re-wet this up here, maybe it'll wrinkle a little bit and we'll be able to see a little bit of a valley where the paint gathers, and I'll show you what you can do about that. Rinse. Start walking that down. All right, it's not going to do it. All right, but if you had a valley and the paint was gathering there, then you could just take a clean piece of paper towel, dry, and take just the edge of it and just let the edge of it touch the wet paint that is gathered in a spot, and that will wick. Basically all you're doing is you're wicking up the excess moisture. You don't want to blot it. You don't want to blot it because blotting it will lift off the color and leave a dry patch. Pardon me. Got a frog today. Feeling perfectly fine, just my voice is not cooperating. Okay, so there's our finished jar. Still has to dry. Wrong way. Oh, now you see my messy table. There we go. All right. I thought I turned, Margaret Ann, I turned on my dryer and I thought I had turned down the sound. Apparently I did not. Sorry, Rudy. Made you jump. Anyway, so that's it for this week. I'm gonna sign off. I can see, like, isn't it so much better with color than just doing it in grays? Like, I think just getting color into your watercolor just makes it more lively and so on. All I did was I did the same picture. I just used the same value and different colors. So I have, and I'm just noticing I've got a little spot down here that's a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to soften that and blot it just to lighten it up a little bit. To me that was a little bit too dark, so I'm just wetting it and blotting it and lightening it up. Easy fix. So sound is off. Oh. I hope you can hear me. I think you can hear me. Gosh, wouldn't that be something if I talked the whole time and no sound? Anyway, you can let me know if you heard me or not. Otherwise, I guess I might have to do this again. Oh, Sarnia. Oh, okay. Yeah, very nice. Okay, so that's it for today. I'm signing off. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for popping in. And if you want to share this with somebody you think might like it, feel free. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.